It is a crisp, cool morning in November 2021. The kind of morning in southeast Washington, D.C. where the air feels sharp and the city is just beginning to wake up. In a quiet, older apartment building, a young woman is standing in her hallway, going through the mundane motions of getting ready for work. She's perhaps thinking about her commute, the emails waiting in her inbox, or what she's going to have for lunch. She has absolutely no idea that violence, brutal, calculated violence, has followed her right to her doorstep. Suddenly, the stillness of her apartment is shattered by the sharp, demanding ring of the doorbell. She pauses. It's early for a visitor. Frowning, she walks over to the heavy wooden door and presses her eye against the peephole. Standing out in the hallway is a middle-aged woman. She is wearing a nondescript brown jacket, her hair tucked away beneath the brim of a baseball cap that casts a shadow over her eyes. In her hands, she is carefully holding a brown UPS package. To the young woman inside, this picture makes perfect sense. It's the holiday season approaching. Deliveries happen at all hours. It's just an ordinary delivery driver dropping off a parcel. Her guard drops completely. With a swift motion, she unlocks the deadbolt and pulls the door open. But there is no package to sign for. The moment the door swings wide enough, the woman in the baseball cap raises her hand. Bang! Bang! Two deafening gunshots echo through the narrow, carpeted hallway. The young woman doesn't even have time to scream. The impact throws her backward, and she collapses onto the floor, having been shot twice in the abdomen, blood instantly pooling on the hardwood. The attacker doesn't flinch. She doesn't pause to check if the job is done. With chilling efficiency, she lowers the handgun, tucks it away, turns on her heel, and briskly walks out of the building. The entire execution takes less than 20 seconds. By the time terrified neighbors, jolted awake by the gunfire, manage to dial 911, the shooter has completely vanished into the D.C. morning. When the police arrive, they find a chaotic, bloody scene. But miraculously, the young woman is still clinging to life. As paramedics rush her to the trauma center, investigators immediately begin pulling footage from every security camera in the vicinity. It doesn't take long for them to spot a dark-colored sedan speeding away from the neighborhood right after the shooting. They enhance the footage, pull the license plate, and run it through the national database, expecting to find a local gang member, a hitman, or perhaps a violent ex-partner. But when the registered owners' names pop up on the screen, the detectives are struck by a wave of profound confusion. The car is registered to a middle-aged married couple, Tommie Lynn Dunmire and John Nelson McQuillan. This is not just any couple. To law enforcement, these names are immediately recognizable. 8 months prior in the state of Ohio, their 31-year-old son, Matthew John Dunmire, was found brutally murdered in a national park. The investigators vividly remember Tommie. She had been on the evening news multiple times, a grieving, heartbroken mother, her voice trembling with unspeakable sorrow as she begged the public for any information about her son's killer. She had seemed so composed, so tragically rational in the face of unimaginable loss. How could this weeping mother, the ultimate symbol of victimization, now be the prime suspect in a cold-blooded drive-by in the nation's capital? A nationwide manhunt is instantly launched for Tommie and John. For days, the couple manages to stay off the grid as they flee the capital, but eventually, the net closes in. Police spot their dark sedan during a routine traffic stop. Patrol cars immediately converge, lights flashing, commanding the couple to pull over. Realizing there is no escape and the walls are closing in, they bring the vehicle to a halt. Officers draw their weapons, taking cover behind their doors, screaming for the occupants to show their hands. Then, before anyone can make a move, a heavy, muffled pop echoes from inside the sedan. The officers freeze. Slowly, cautiously, they approach the vehicle. Inside, the tragic saga of the grieving parents has come to a devastating end. Rather than face the justice system she felt had abandoned her, Tommie had turned a gun on herself, ending her life right there in the passenger seat. John, utterly broken and covered in his partner's blood, slowly opens the driver's side door, raises his trembling hands, and surrenders. He would later plead guilty to being an accessory after the fact to assault with intent to kill, receiving a 42-month prison sentence. During the subsequent investigation, a horrifying truth comes to light. The shooting in Washington, D.C. was not a random act of violence, nor was it a spontaneous moment of madness. It was a highly calculated, meticulously planned revenge mission. Tommie and John had spent months tracking down the person they believed had murdered their son. They had traveled from Norfolk, Virginia, obtained an address, and driven to D.C. and pulled the trigger. There was just one catastrophic problem. The young woman bleeding out in that D.C. apartment was completely innocent. She had absolutely no connection to Matthew's murder. It was a tragic, monumental case of mistaken identity. The only silver lining in this dark cloud was that, thanks to the swift actions of paramedics, the innocent young woman miraculously survived her injuries. But the question hanging heavy in the air was this: what kind of all-consuming, suffocating despair drives a once peaceful mother and father to completely abandon their faith in the law, take up arms, and attempt to execute a stranger in cold blood? To understand this descent into madness, we have to rewind the clock. We have to go back 9 months to the beginning of the nightmare. It is March 9th, 2021. We are in Northeast Ohio, in the breathtakingly beautiful Cuyahoga Valley National Park. It is a place of serenity, characterized by dense, towering oak trees, winding rivers, and miles of peaceful trails beloved by hikers and runners. The morning sun is piercing through the bare branches, casting long shadows across the mud and decaying autumn leaves. Around 11 a.m., an avid hiker is making his way toward the Terra Vista Natural Study Area on the western edge of the park. It's a secluded, quiet zone. As he prepares to step onto a narrow, wooded path, something catches his eye. He stops, dead in his tracks. Lying in the thick brush along the slope of the trail is a shape that doesn't belong in nature. It is a man. He is lying face down, motionless. His clothes are completely soaked with the morning dew, indicating he has been there quite some time. The hiker's heart pounds against his ribs. He pulls out his phone and calls 911. Within minutes, local police and National Park Rangers swarm the area, stringing up yellow crime scene tape across the tranquil wilderness. As the forensic team begins their grim work, a chilling picture emerges. The victim is a male in his early 30s. The cause of death is glaringly obvious: a single devastating gunshot wound to the back of the head. The medical examiner estimates that the man has been dead for about 3 days. But it's the condition of the crime scene that truly unnerves the detectives. There are absolutely no signs of a struggle. The surrounding dirt and leaves are undisturbed. There are no drag marks, meaning the victim wasn't killed elsewhere and dumped here. Even more telling, the bullet entered straight and true, suggesting the killer stood directly behind the victim and fired at point-blank range. This was an execution. Furthermore, the location is highly specific. The Terra Vista area is far off the main tourist paths. It requires specific geographical knowledge to navigate. There are no tire tracks nearby. The killer and the victim had walked into this secluded forest together, side by side, until one of them fell. But who was the victim? His pockets have been emptied. No wallet, no phone, no keys, no identification of any kind. A John Doe. Fortunately, because the body was discovered relatively quickly and the cold March weather had preserved the remains, investigators are able to lift a perfect set of fingerprints. They run them through the system, and within a few hours, they have a match. The dead man is 31-year-old Matthew John Dunmire from nearby Cleveland. When the police notify his family, the reaction is one of pure, unadulterated shock. Matthew was not a criminal. He was not involved in drugs or gangs. He was a passionate music producer, a free spirit who loved playing his guitar and writing songs. Though unmarried, he was a devoted partner to his girlfriend and a loving, hands-on father to their 2 young children. He was known among his social circle as a warm, easygoing guy who made friends wherever he went. The idea that someone would march him into the woods and execute him was entirely incomprehensible to everyone who knew him. Desperate for a starting point, investigators sit down with Matthew's mother, Tommie. She is devastated, barely able to speak through her tears. She tells them that the last time anyone in the family heard from Matthew was 3 days prior to the discovery of his body, March 6th. On that morning, Matthew had texted his girlfriend. He told her he was going to a local blood donation center to give blood and that he would be home right after. They exchanged a few casual texts. At 10:29 a.m., Matthew sent his final message. "Okay, see you later." He was never heard from again. When detectives follow up on this lead, they hit a brick wall. Matthew never arrived at the blood bank that day. There was no appointment. He had lied to his girlfriend. But why? Moreover, nobody in his life could explain why he would be at Cuyahoga Valley National Park. He wasn't the outdoorsy type. He didn't hike. He hated walking in the mud. None of his friends or family knew of any plans he had to visit the park. The police immediately obtain a warrant for Matthew's cellular data. The ping history confirms that on the morning of March 6th, his phone did indeed travel to the vicinity of the national park. But right before he went into the woods, his digital footprint shows him stopping at a specific address in the nearby town of Cuyahoga Falls. It is a quaint, standalone cottage, rented out as an Airbnb. Detectives rush to interview the property owner. The landlord reveals that the cottage had been rented by a woman. She had booked it online and paid up front. The landlord remembers her because upon checking in, she provided a vehicle license plate number that belonged to the state of Virginia, hundreds of miles away. This is the first crack in the case. The police pull the Airbnb account data. The account is registered to a woman with a generic-sounding name, but when they cross-reference the name with the Virginia Vehicle Registration Database, it's a total mismatch. The name on the Airbnb account doesn't exist. It's an alias. The hairs on the back of the detectives' necks stand up. People taking a weekend vacation don't use fake names to rent cabins. People who are planning a murder do. Knowing they are dealing with a calculated killer, the police deployed teams to canvass the neighborhoods surrounding the park, knocking on every door and stopping every hiker they can find. This grueling legwork pays off. Several hikers recall that on the morning of March 6th, sometime between 11:30 a.m. and noon, they heard a single, sharp gunshot echoing from the direction of the Terra Vista trails. Most hadn't thought twice about it, as there is an outdoor shooting range located a few miles away, and distant gunfire isn't entirely uncommon. But one couple provides a chilling piece of the puzzle. While walking near the trailhead that same morning, they crossed paths with a woman. She was dressed entirely in black, a dark hoodie pulled up, heavy black combat boots on her feet. What disturbed them most, however, was her demeanor. The couple described her eyes as completely hollow, staring straight through them. When they asked if she was okay, she replied in a flat, monotone, emotionless voice that she was just looking for a cemetery and had gotten lost. The bizarre encounter had left the couple deeply unsettled. Simultaneously, investigators are diving deep into Matthew's personal life. A coworker drops a crucial hint. A few weeks before his death, Matthew had confided that he had reconnected with a woman. The coworker had even seen Matthew getting into a white sedan after work one day. Armed with this, the police bring in tech experts to scour Matthew's social media. Buried in his Facebook messages, they find a single ominous direct message sent to Matthew just 1 week before he was murdered. It reads simply, "Hey, We should meet. The sender's name? Chelsea. The puzzle pieces begin to violently snap together. The fake Airbnb account, the Virginia license plate, the woman in the black hoodie, the mysterious Chelsea. Could they all be the same person? Detectives run the Virginia license plate provided to the Airbnb host. It comes back to a white sedan. The registered owner is an active duty member of the United States Coast Guard living in Alexandria, Virginia. And his wife's name is Chelsea Perkins. The name matches the Facebook message perfectly. The police immediately zero in on Chelsea Perkins, pulling every record they can find on her. What they discover leaves seasoned investigators speechless. Chelsea Perkins is not your average suburban housewife. She is a highly trained military veteran. She served a full 10 years in the U.S. Coast Guard, a branch of the military that demands rigorous physical and mental discipline. During her service, she received extensive training in battlefield survival, tactical response, and, most importantly, advanced firearms proficiency. Her military record paints a picture of a soldier who was fiercely disciplined, obedient, and highly capable under pressure. But the surprises don't end there. After her honorable discharge, Chelsea took a career path that was, to put it mildly, a staggering pivot. Using the pseudonym Selena Savage, she had become a highly successful creator on OnlyFans. For those unfamiliar, OnlyFans is a subscription-based platform where creators can upload content, often adult or highly explicit in nature, for paying subscribers. The transition from a disciplined, uniform-wearing, border-patrolling military officer to a sultry, provocative internet model selling explicit videos was a jarring dichotomy. It was as if she were living two entirely separate lives, completely compartmentalized. To her subscribers, she was a fantasy. To her former military peers, she was a phantom. She never used her real name online and kept her location strictly confidential. But how did a military veteran turned internet model living in Virginia cross paths with a music producer living in Ohio? Detectives dig into their pasts and find the connective tissue. More than a decade ago, from 2005 to 2009, Chelsea and Matthew attended the exact same high school. But what had happened between them? Had they stayed in touch all these years? Was this a romantic rendezvous gone wrong or a carefully orchestrated trap? Believing Chelsea is the prime suspect, investigators secure a multi-agency search warrant. On March 30, 2021, a SWAT team descends upon Chelsea's two-story home in the quiet suburbs of Alexandria, Virginia. The house looks completely normal from the outside. Inside, it is impeccably clean. There is no blood, no smell of bleach, no signs of panic. But as they search the master bedroom, a detective opens a woman's handbag sitting on a dresser. Inside, resting heavily at the bottom, is a silver revolver semi-automatic handgun. The weapon is meticulously clean, recently oiled, and stored alongside several rounds of unfired ammunition. The police immediately bag the gun and rush it to the forensics lab. The ballistics report comes back quickly and definitively. The striations on the barrel perfectly matched the bullet dug out of Matthew Dunmire's skull. In addition to the murder weapon, they find Chelsea's primary cell phone left sitting on a counter. They extract the GPS data, which tells a damning story. The phone's location history proves that in the days leading up to the murder, Chelsea drove hundreds of miles from Virginia straight to the Airbnb in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. She had told no one. Her husband thought she was on a solo road trip to clear her head. Furthermore, forensic analysts uncovered a deleted fake suicide note on her phone that she had fabricated, pretending to be written by Matthew, as well as evidence that she had traveled to Michigan immediately after the crime before heading back to Virginia. The evidence is overwhelming. Chelsea Perkins is the killer. But there is one massive problem. Chelsea is gone. By leaving her cell phone behind, Chelsea, drawing on her military training, knew exactly how to sever her digital leash. She knew that in the modern age, a phone is a tracking beacon. Furthermore, she hadn't contacted a single family member or friend. Her lucrative OnlyFans account went completely dark. Her bank accounts showed zero activity. She hadn't used a credit card, drawn out cash from an ATM, or been spotted on any surveillance cameras. The highly trained veteran had essentially become a ghost, vanishing off the face of the earth. In April 2021, the FBI joins the hunt. Chelsea's face is plastered on wanted posters across multiple states. Federal marshals track down every possible lead, but the trail is ice cold. For 9 agonizing months, there is not a single credible sighting of Chelsea Perkins. It is during this 9-month void that Matthew's parents, Tommie and John, begin to lose their minds. The grief is bad enough, but the feeling that the police are incompetent, that the justice system is failing them, becomes a toxic obsession. They convince themselves that the police aren't trying hard enough. They decide that if the law won't bring their son's killer to justice, they will have to do it themselves. This toxic cocktail of grief and rage is what led them to that apartment in Washington, D.C. in November 2021, where they tragically shot an innocent woman, believing she was harboring Chelsea or was involved in the murder. In a cruel twist of irony, just days after Tommie takes her own life on that Florida highway, the ghost finally makes a mistake. In a coordinated strike involving multiple federal agencies, Chelsea Perkins is apprehended in Pensacola, Florida. The authorities remain tight-lipped about exactly how they tracked her down. Perhaps a burner phone, a momentary lapse in discipline, or a tip-off. But the manhunt is over. When the handcuffs click around her wrists, Chelsea doesn't cry. She doesn't scream or claim innocence. Her face is a mask of absolute, chilling calm. It is the face of a soldier who has completed her mission and is ready to face the consequences. The question that has haunted investigators for almost a year finally has an answer, buried deep within the dusty archives of a Virginia Beach police precinct. While digging into Chelsea's deep past, a detective uncovers a police report filed in 2017. In the report, Chelsea Perkins officially accused Matthew Dunmire of sexually assaulting her back when they were in high school. The assault allegedly occurred sometime between 2005 and 2009. By the time Chelsea found the courage to go to the police in 2017, a decade had passed. Because there was no physical evidence, no video, and no witnesses to corroborate a crime that happened 10 years prior, the police hands were tied. The case was never officially opened, no charges were filed. Matthew was never even brought in for questioning. The system simply filed the report away in a cabinet. But for Chelsea, the trauma was not filed away. It festered. While we can never fully know the nightmares she endured, friends and family later revealed that Chelsea harbored a deep, burning resentment toward the justice system. She felt utterly betrayed, unprotected, and cast aside by the very laws she had sworn to defend during her military service. The psychological wound of the assault, combined with the trauma of being ignored by the authorities, grew into an uncontrollable monster. Her psyche fractured, and she decided that true justice could only be administered through the barrel of a gun. The prosecution lays out a chilling timeline of premeditation. Chelsea didn't just snap one day. She spent months planning Matthew's execution. She created the fake Airbnb profile. She plotted a driving route that would minimize her exposure to toll cameras. She left her phone and credit cards behind, operating entirely on cash and discipline. She reached out to Matthew with a vague message, luring him into a false sense of security. Matthew, completely unaware of the raging storm heading his way, lied to his girlfriend about giving blood, perhaps feeling a twinge of guilt about meeting up with an old high school acquaintance. He walked into the secluded woods of the national park, trusting the woman walking behind him. He never saw the gun being raised. On December 16, 2021, Chelsea Perkins is formally indicted on charges of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and the use of a firearm in a violent crime. As the trial preparations begin, Chelsea's defense team mounts a desperate strategy. They argue that Chelsea is suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. They paint a picture of a woman whose psychological pressure from the unprocessed sexual trauma had built up to a catastrophic breaking point. Citing academic literature on military veterans and survivors of sexual violence, the defense argues that Chelsea experienced a psychotic break, a morbid, extreme form of self-preservation where her repressed terror mutated into an uncontrollable offensive attack. They plead for leniency, arguing her actions were driven by untreated mental illness. But the prosecution fiercely dismantles this narrative. They point to the cold, hard facts of the premeditation. A person suffering a sudden, uncontrollable psychotic break does not spend weeks organizing a fake identity, renting a remote cabin, and driving hundreds of miles without leaving a digital trace. Furthermore, they reveal that just days before the murder, Chelsea was cheerfully live-streaming on OnlyFans, interacting with her subscribers without showing a single sign of mental distress or erratic behavior. This was not a panic attack. It was a highly organized, tactical strike. The judge agrees with the prosecution. The PTSD defense is severely weakened, and Chelsea is facing the terrifying prospect of a first-degree murder conviction, which carries a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. It is worth noting that during the investigation, another woman, identified only as SS in court documents, came forward to police claiming that she too had been sexually assaulted by Matthew years ago, but had been too terrified of retaliation to report it. However, the judge rules that her testimony is inadmissible, as it lacks hard evidence and is not directly related to the murder trial at hand. On May 27, 2025, just days before the jury selection is set to begin, the weight of the evidence finally crushes Chelsea's resolve. Through her attorneys, she approaches the court and accepts a plea deal. She pleads guilty to second-degree murder and the use of a firearm during a violent crime, effectively taking the first-degree murder charge off the table. The plea is accepted. On September 9, 2025, Judge Solomon Oliver hands down the final sentence, 22.5 years in federal prison. For the legal system, the gavel has fallen. The files are closed. The case is resolved. But the human cost of this tragedy defies any legal resolution. This case is not just about a body in a forest or a woman behind bars. It is a terrifying study of what happens when trauma is left to rot in the dark. It is a story of dual destruction, fueled by the perceived failure of the law. When the justice system failed Chelsea, she abandoned her morality and took up the mantle of an executioner. And when the justice system seemingly moved too slowly from Matthew's parents, they too descended into the very darkness they were fighting, resulting in the shedding of innocent blood and their own ultimate demise. In the span of this nightmare, Matthew was murdered. Exactly 263 days later, Chelsea was captured. And 168 days after Chelsea finally confessed, Matthew's mother pulled the trigger on herself. The cycle of vengeance is a beast with an insatiable appetite. An old wound left untreated unleashed a storm that completely eradicated 3 separate families. This dark chapter of human history leaves us with a chilling realization. When justice is absent, hatred is always waiting in the shadows, ready to hand us a weapon. But violence only breeds more violence, and revenge is a poison that destroys the vessel it's carried in. In this story, there is no triumphant victor holding the scales of justice. There are only broken survivors, empty chairs at dinner tables, and deep, agonizing scars that will never truly fade away. Thank you for walking through this dark corridor with me today. If this deep dive into the true cost of vengeance resonated with you, if the psychological twists kept you gripped to the very end, please do me a favor. Hit that like button to support the channel, subscribe to the Puppeteer, and make sure you ring that bell so you never miss a case. We rely on you to keep bringing these stories to the surface. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next one.